What's up, guys? Welcome back to ATEM Off-Road. If you like what you see, new brake kit by PowerStop is the Z23 Evolution Sport. We're going to be installing the rotors, pads, and a new caliper today, so stay tuned. Okay guys, to start the installation, we're going to block both the rear tires. Next, I'm going to jack up the front of the vehicle and lower the frame on stands. And with a 3/4 inch impact, we're going to take off all 5 lug nuts and remove the front wheels. We're going to remove the 2 13mm bolts that attach the caliper to the steering knuckle and remove the caliper like so, and set the caliper off to the side. And remove the rotor, slides off like this. So next, I'm going to take a 14mm wrench with a hammer and just strike the wrench real quick to loosen up the banjo bolt that's attached to the brake caliper. It's a good idea to have a drip pan underneath the caliper because some fluid's going to drip out of this banjo bolt. I'm going to set the new caliper off to the side. With the new caliper ready to go and the brake line ready to transfer, I'm going to take some needle nose pliers and remove the plastic cap. It's a plug that's protecting the threads on the caliper. In the caliper replacement kit, you'll see some copper crush washers and bolts. We're going to take the old banjo bolt off and discard the old copper crush gaskets, or washers if you will, and install the new copper crush washers onto the bolt, one onto the bolt, and then the bolt slips through the banjo fitting, and then we'll take that second washer and add it, and we'll begin to thread the bolt into the caliper with the new crush gaskets. We want to make sure that the banjo fitting, it only goes on one way and that you're not twisted 180 out, so the brake line is not twisted. You want to make sure it goes on exactly the way it came off onto the new caliper. So I'm just going to take my 14mm wrench and snug up that bolt to the caliper, and we'll torque this later on. So next, in prepping the caliper, we're going to take some of this brake grease. I like to add some to the face of the piston and on the side where both of the pads make contact to the caliper. Just keep in mind that the brake slide pins are already pre-lubed from the manufacturer, and with the new boots installed, everything should be good to go on that side. The grease here really eliminates noise and keeps everything in good working condition. So here we're going to begin to install the first brake pad onto the piston. It snaps in just like this, pretty simple. And then on the other side, the outside pad, there's going to be 2 pins that are going to seat into the caliper, and it just snaps in like so. So there's a film around the rotor, both sides, that comes from the manufacturer. We're going to go ahead and take some brake clean like this and spray both sides of the rotor and wipe that all off. So the next thing I'm going to do is take some of this brake grease and I'm going to put a coat here on this steering knuckle and on the top of the steering knuckle where the caliper bolts to. I'm going to lube here and here. Then I'm going to set on the new rotor like so. And I'm going to get my 2 bolts like this that came in the kit, and I'm going to apply some Loctite to the ends of these bolts. Okay, so now I'm ready to set the caliper on the rotor and bolt the caliper to the steering knuckle. You'll see some notches here on the brake pads. Those are going to go on the bottom first. So I'm going to set those down, and I want to make sure these pins are out of the way. So I'm going to set it on just like this. And I'm going to take my 2 bolts and I'm going to run them through the pins. So I'm going to take my torque wrench with a 12mm socket, and I'm going to torque these 2 bolts down to 11 foot-pounds. Next, I'm going to take a 14mm socket, and I'm going to torque the banjo brake line fitting to the caliper bolt at 23 foot-pounds. Awesome. So now we have the calipers mounted and installed. We're going to go ahead and get any air or old oil out of the system. So the manufacturer recommends before you actually bleed these new calipers is to do a total flush. And that's kind of what I've done already. I've already flushed the whole brake system with the old calipers on. And then now with the new calipers on, we're going to double check that there's no air in the system and that the calipers themselves are working in proper order with the pistons. So to do that, we're going to need this one-man brake bleeder kit. Pretty simple kit to use. I'll show you how it works. It's about 13 bucks at AutoZone. A 3/8 wrench for the bleeder screw on the caliper, and then also some .3 brake fluid. In my case, that's what I'm using for this brake system. So I'm going to go ahead and get this all prepped up and ready to go. In the next segment, we're going to bleed these new calipers. So I'm going to remove the contents from this package and set it up for you. So essentially it's going to be a sealed system with a cup and a cap. There's a shorter straw. We're going to apply that to the nipple on the bottom side of the cap, and that keeps the system airtight. You're going to see how this works as soon as we hook it up to the caliper. Also, you're going to see a longer hose that's going to connect to the top nipple of the cap, and that will complete our connection through the cap into the cup, and it will also provide a sealed connection. In the package, there's going to be 3 nipples. They're rubber. Those are going to connect to the hose. You're going to find out which one you're going to need. In this case, this one is mine. And I'm going to fill the cup with some brake fluid up to the top and double check that the shorter hose is going to go inside of the fluid. So this is going to be a pretty important step to make sure that tube is into the fluid. Essentially, when the brake bleeder is set up to the caliper and everything's working properly, when the pedal is pressed and the bleeder valve is open, fluid and air is forced out of the caliper. At this point, if the bleeder valve is not closed on the back side, it will create a vacuum, pulling the air and fluid back into the system. So the brake bleeder kit, if working properly, allows the air to escape from the system and only allow new fluid to go back into the caliper. Once the brake pedal has been pressed and depressed quite a few times, all the air leaves the system and it's become a closed loop system. And at this point, you can tighten up the bleeder valve on the caliper. So before we begin this procedure, we want to double check that our fluid reservoir at the master cylinder is full. We want to top that off as needed because we did allow fluid to drain out when we swapped out the calipers. So once the nipple is applied to the valve, I'm going to go ahead and loosen up the valve with a 3/8 wrench. And I'm going to go inside of the cab and start pumping the fluid out of the reservoir. So as I'm pumping the fluid out of the caliper, more fluid is coming in from the reservoir at the top of the master cylinder under the hood. So as you can see, I'm pumping. You can see the air and the fluid start to come out of the caliper into the cup. The air bubbles will release from the other nipple on the other side of the cup. Once the air bubbles release and the system has become a constant, clean fluid stream with no air bubbles going back into the caliper, that is when I am ready to complete the flush, if you will, and tighten up that bleeder screw. But I'm going to keep continually pumping it until I don't see any more bubbles in the system, and all of the old fluid, you can tell by coloration, has exited out of the system and has now been replaced with new fluid. So now that we're good to go on this side of the caliper, we're going to repeat all the same steps for the other side as far as installation and bleeding the calipers, setting it up ready to go. So if you're interested in a full flush system, I'm going to do that on the other Jeep, which is the green Jeep. Stay tuned for that video coming soon. I'm going to put a link right here in this video so you can go over there and see how I properly flush the whole brake system in my Jeep. So next, I'm going to go ahead and tighten that bleeder valve and remove this system from the caliper. And we're just going to go ahead and, like I said, repeat these steps for the other side. Also, don't forget to put the rubber cap back on the bleeder valve. So here I'm just going to open the cap and show you the coloration and some of the debris that came out of that caliper, which we don't want in our system. But for example, this is what it looks like. And I'm just going to go ahead and clean up this mess. And another Helpful tip is just top off that reservoir fluid one more time and just make sure you're good to go on the levels for your master cylinder. And don't forget to put your cap back on. So now that I'm done with both sides, I'm going to go ahead and put the wheel back on and torque all the 5 lug nuts in a crosspatch pattern to 95 foot-pounds. So guys, if you made it this far, thanks for stopping by and watching this video. I had a lot of fun installing this power stop brake kit on my Jeep Wrangler TJ, and I hope you do too. So hit that like button for me and also consider subscribing to the channel. Helps out the channel. So have a good day and we'll see you on the next video, guys. Peace.